Hey guys, my name is Ryan, and welcome to Overwatch Central. Today again we're talking to Sideshow about the PTR changes about Baptiste, but more specifically looking at heroes like McCree, Doomfist, Symmetra, all of which who were buff, and basically working out how good these changes are for these individual heroes with these new changes. You can check out all of Sideshow's stuff in the description below, but let's get started talking about Baptiste.
It's super difficult to say whether Baptiste is going to be like a meta hero moving forwards. I think, to me, he looks like he's got a very powerful kit, but it's quite situational. And the reason I say that is that the immortality field can be, you can run away from it for starters. You can do a lot of damage to the people that are inside of it, and then you can kill it. So although it seems like an incredibly powerful ability, and it certainly is, and it stops, grav bomb combos and all stuff like that, the fact that the players in it are going to be really weak and will therefore require a lot of healing as well as the immortality field, and you can just run away from it and choose not to take the fight exactly where the immortality field is, means that it seems to lend itself more towards quite static compositions. So stuff like the Orisa comps, where you're playing in one area and you just want to hold your ground and defend, that seems like a perfect opportunity to get value out of Baptiste. You can set up his ultimate and do a huge amount of damage through it. You can set up the immortality field and his healing, and it's going to do crazy amounts, and you can do damage with him as well. And then he's got the mobility to be able to take up, different positions and support his team. So I think in those comps, he'll get a lot of value. But in GOATs or in Dive, I don't think he's going to be that good. Because he doesn't have very natural synergy with a lot of the other support heroes. So it seems likely to me that you're going to have to run him along with two other supports, rather than instead of one of the supports. Discord, even though it's been nerfed, is still so powerful, and you can't really run him alongside Zen because both of those targets can be pretty easily dived, I think. And even with the immortality field, again, if you dive them and they go weak and they have to pop the immortality field, I don't think you're getting the best value out of Baptiste. If you're just using that to save yourself or save yourself and your Zen, I think you're probably wasting it as an ability. So it seems unlikely to me that he's going to be used in compositions that are very mobile, but the static poke kind of bunker comps, I think it could be crazy powerful.
So I guess on that note, if somebody was pointing a gun at you and said you need to craft a composition with Baptiste in it, what other heroes would work alongside? What would be like the ultimate Baptiste composition? Theory crafting, of course.
Ultimate Baptiste composition. How about this one? What I'm thinking is, all right, let's go Anubis point A, and I'm going to kind of take a composition that already exists, but I'm going to add Baptiste to it. And basically what I'm going to do is just straight replace the Zen with a Baptiste. And Baptiste has, so what you got is you've got your Orisa, you've got your Diva alongside, and then you've got a Widowmaker Junkrat, and then you've got Baptiste and a Mercy. And the idea here is that when they dive you to try and stop you just spamming or headshotting them, you're going to be able to drop the immortality field and get the picks or get the riptire and kill them, because that Junkrat is just literally going to be immortal. And then if they try and dive your backline, if they try and push you around and get individual picks, well, you don't have that Zen anymore that's actually quite easy to dive. Instead, you've got a Baptiste who can jump out or can use the immortality field or has got self-healing, AoE healing. So I think he could be a good replacement for Zen in some of the more static compositions. Also on
2CP defense.
Yeah, on 2CP defense, but also when teams are running on Ilios well, we've seen a lot of teams in the Overwatch League right now, instead of running GOATs, they run Orisa, they run a Diva, they run Brigitte, Lucio, Zen, and then they run a McCree. And the idea is that you've got the double stun of the Brigitte shield bash and the McCree flashbang. And I think instead of running a Zenyatta there, if you had a Baptiste, again, insanely difficult to be able to dive because of that immortality field, and also does a huge amount of damage because you've got the Baptiste and the McCree firing at you now. I mean, the Zen also does a huge amount of damage, but the difference in being able to dive the Zen is a big difference, I think. So in some of these comps, I think you'll see Baptiste get run, and you could even run him instead of the DPS in a couple of situations, like if you wanted to run him in if you wanted to run him on a high ground defense, for example, where you have the ability to look over the top of everybody and help from a long distance, maybe in the same way that people used to use Soldier 76 on Gibraltar, point A defense, you just hold really far back and you throw your immortality field and throw your healing in to help your tanks.
Because I was going to say, we did a video highlighting how Shofar was playing him in the Pro Pugs, and you know, like he was right at the far back on Gardens, where you would maybe sort of hold as an Ana or a Zen, but because it's a control map, you're always running the risk of a Sombra running behind you. But because you're Baptiste, you can look after yourself so much more than a Zen or an Ana can, and sort of survive. What about attack? Because this is very much predominantly 2CP defense. He sounds really strong. Is he just not as good on attack?
It comes down to whether you can get value out of the immortality field and his ultimate. Both of those are pretty static abilities, right? So when you're attacking and you have to be like moving all the time, it seems more difficult to get value out of him. You could do it on hybrid maps, I think, because if you just put the immortality field on the point as you're pushing, well, eventually the defensive team does actually have to come down to the point. On payload, it seems a bit more difficult to me to be able to get value out of it, because if you just put it on the payload, they're just going to be able to kill the immortality field and then they're going to kill you. So I think he'll mostly be a bit of a defensive hero, but with some niche ability to be played on offense of maybe hybrid maps and stuff like that. But I do expect him to be mostly a defensive hero that's with mostly static compositions as well. But like I said, it's super difficult to tell.
I did want to talk about some of the other heroes that, like, we'll just go through them, and I just kind of want to hear if you think that the changes on the PTR were big for them, or just sort of, because there's stuff like Doomfist, McCree, Soldier on there that I really want to get your impression on whether you think that these changes are actually a little bit better than people may be giving them credit for. We'll start with Doomfist with the, you know, reduction of cooldowns for two of his major abilities. Do you feel that we're going to see Doomfist coming back in a big way? Because he was used in like anti-goats comps with Doomfist and Sombra. Sombra's still pretty good. Doomfist is a little bit better. Can we see that again? Is there potential there?
I think there is potential to see Doomfist back, yeah. People thought he was terrible after they made some changes to how his slam worked. You couldn't do it from so far away, and the uppercut didn't really hold people in place, so you couldn't get those insta-kill combos as easily. But he's very powerful, and with these cooldown reductions, he's going to be able to zip around the map really quickly as well. So I definitely think that this is another hero that's been buffed that will allow some kind of countering of Goat's compositions. And Sombra Doomfist dive, or Sombra Genji dive, or a bunch of stuff like this is, I think, going to be pretty valuable. So yeah, I think the best Doomfist is always pretty niche, right? There's only a few players, even in the Overwatch League, who are good enough to be able to pull it off. But if you're a Doomfist fan, look out for Hydration and look out for Blase, because I think those are the two guys that are really going to run the most Doomfist next stage, if it's viable.
Yeah, he was even played stage 1 so far already, even before any of these changes.
It's true,
so
yeah.
Players are still playing him. McCree, there's been a lot of talk about the big sort of damage increase to his ultimate, or how quickly it ramps up to do damage to, you know, beefier targets. Just a sort of cool change to look at, or do you think there's a bit more merit to it?
It seems to me to be just a quite nice, quite a nice change for McCree to be able to burst down these bigger health targets more quickly with his Deadeye. But McCree's Deadeye isn't the biggest part of his kit. You know, at the top level, it's really just about these insane players that are able to hit shots on everything and do a lot of pressure to like Pharahs and Sombras. So I think we're still going to be able to see McCree get used a lot. I think McCree paired with Brigitte is really powerful. The fact that you have those double stuns and you can stop people diving you, you know, even a Sombra Tracer or a Sombra Genji, or all of these compositions that you would normally run dive really struggle against a Brigitte and a McCree. And even the Pharah compositions, you know, McCree's just sniping them out of the air. So I think McCree's in a pretty good space, and this only makes him a little bit better.
How about Orisa? Her movement's a lot faster, but it seems like, much like Baptiste, very much defensive orientated. You could tell Blizzard were trying to make her maybe a bit better on attack, that she can move forward while shooting.
Yeah. Now, am I right in saying as well that she can get booped more easily now? I think that's the case,
I'm
right?
pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the ability for Orisa to get booped more is actually a pretty big change that people aren't talking about that much. And the reason is, people use Orisa compositions on Ilios Well and Nepal Sanctum pretty much exclusively. Like, we have seen no Reinhardt goats on those maps, almost at all in the Overwatch League, because it's so easy to just boop the Rein into the pit and then your composition's dead. And now that Orisa is much easier to boop, and D.Va as well, I think both of these heroes, the Orisa especially, because she doesn't have the boosters to be able to get herself out of the pit, will be much more vulnerable. So Lucios are just going to be going around booping everybody all over the place. I think we're going to see Orisa's falling here, there, and everywhere into holes, and maybe that'll mean that we don't see as much Orisa actually getting played, even though it should be a buff. The kind of niche situations on some of these maps where she was so good before because she's just like a lump of mud, she's just stuck there that you can't do anything about her. She doesn't have that niche.
We've sort of failed to mention it, but you know, when you're defending Temple of Anubis, you're right on the back on the high ground. Be easier to boop Orisa off of it, right?
Yeah, that's true. Any kind of super high ground hold is going to be slightly worse with Orisa. I mean, there's still good opportunities to get value out of Orisa, and on maps like Dorado, we've still seen in the Overwatch League people using Orisa to be able to attack Dorado. It's rare, but we've seen a couple of teams like Philadelphia Fusion be able to make a really good showing of using those compositions that were really popular in like August, July of last year. Mm-hmm. So I think she does have some other niche uses. I would beware, man. I think the Orisas are gonna die the death on a couple of these maps.
How about Soldier? Soldier is one of those weird heroes. Probably, he must be like one of the lowest picked heroes other than maybe Roadhog at this point, but like, the buff's helping him at all? Or do you feel like, again, what's his problem, I guess?
As everybody knows who's been around in Overwatch for a while, there was a time when Soldier had 20 damage per pellet, and it was incredibly powerful, just insanely powerful. It really depends on where the meta goes. So that buff to Soldier isn't enough to make him powerful in and of himself, but if compositions are strong that allow Soldier to be played, then that is going to really be insane. You know, some of the best players in the world, AKM, Defran, Sire Player, these guys that can just track like gods, if compositions come around that allow them to play Soldier, they're going to be scary good with this new change.
Symmetra, not really a massive change, but she has been played in the Overwatch League, not just from the Showfall thing, it's been used a couple of times now already by different teams.
Yeah, maybe 5 or 6 times teams have tried to use Symmetra, which is super interesting. And you know, if you're a fan of Symmetra and you didn't get to see her played at all last season, literally didn't get played last season whatsoever, and she's been played quite a bit in 2019, so I think it's really promising. As for how this change works, I think it's going to be you know, it's a nice change, but I don't think it really affects that much. It's definitely an improvement, definitely a buff, but the way she's being used at the moment, you're pretty much shooting shields a lot of the time anyway. You're just doing a lot of damage to the Reinhardt shield because it charges up and it's impossible to miss a Reinhardt shield, right? It's so big, so you just get that charge max damage all the time. So the ramp up speed change isn't really going to help us so much in this meta, but in future metas it might be. And her biggest problem at the moment is it's difficult to actually do enough damage so that once you go through the teleporters, you're still a useful hero. So if this change makes her viable as a bit of a DPS hero, then we could definitely see way more creative Symmetra compositions, and they're always really fun to watch.
Well, I was going to say, like, why is she being used a lot at the moment?
Well, at the moment, in theory, she does synergize pretty well with tank compositions because it just allows you to get through choke points instantly with the teleporter, right? You can teleport straight past the enemy team and be able to get either right in their faces or past a choke point or onto the point, all of this stuff. So teams are generally using it to be able to get behind. So it's basically Symmetra's just being used for her teleporter to be able to get behind teams or put the rest of your team in a really good position. The problem is it's not working most of the time because Symmetra just isn't as good when the team fight actually happens. So the teleporter sets you up for a really good team fight, but the Symmetra herself doesn't really do that much in the fight. So any buff that helps Symmetra be a better standalone hero is just going to mean that she's more useful for these niche situations where you can teleport into better situations.
Finally, last, but I guess some would say least, Brigitte. You sort of mentioned it before, but I guess the main question was, if Goats does diminish and go away, what happens to Brigitte? Because that's really the only composition that it felt, at least from a perspective, was that she was only played in. But from what you said before, McCree, Brigitte are quite strong. If Goats does, in inverted commas, die, where will Brigitte be? Will she be played at all? Do you think that that's somewhere that she's in a good spot?
I think Brigitte is still a very powerful hero, despite the fact that she's been nerfed a lot of times. Her armor pack is so powerful. The fact that you can just instantly heal somebody, way further up, is a massive deal. And I think she'll still get played, because anytime a team is playing dive, the #1 counter is to run a Brigitte. Anytime a team is playing a Tracer, or a Sombra Genji, or a lot of these different compositions, the best counter is a Brig. And Brig pairs really well with McCree, like I was saying before, so I think we'll still see a lot of Brig McCree comps, the double stun compositions, and I think that we'll see her getting played maybe alongside Baptiste in like a triple support composition when you see the Orisa comps as well, because you want to be as tanky as possible in terms of like not being able to be dived, and Brig is just the best hero in the game to stop you being dived.
And hopefully you'll be back in the US by the time that these changes go live, so
Hopefully.
You can sort of predict all of this and you can sort of bring it back to this video. But until then, you are streaming and doing a lot of YouTube stuff at the moment. Where can people find more of you analysing the Overwatch League, but also telling some really weird stories about your old housemates and stuff? Where can people find more of you?
You can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/sideshow, and my Twitter and YouTube are twitter.com/sideshowgaming and youtube.com/sideshowgaming, where, as you said, there's some serious content and some ridiculous humor as well.
And that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. As I said, you can check out all of Sideshow's stuff in the description below if you'd like to. Thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.